Look, I need to get this out before I completely lose it. Some of you are going to think I'm insane for what I'm planning, but hear me out because this gets so much worse than you think. 3 months ago, my wife Victoria came to me crying about her mother Everly's cancer diagnosis. Stage 4, they said. Needed this experimental treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. $80,000. I watched this woman I loved fall apart talking about losing her mom, and I didn't hesitate for a second. I'd been collecting classic cars since I was 22. Started with a 1967 Camaro SS that I found in some guy's barn and spent 2 years restoring. Over 15 years, I built up this collection that was basically my entire identity outside of work and marriage. A 1970 Dodge Challenger, a 1969 Mustang Boss 429, a 1963 Corvette split window. These weren't just cars to me. They were pieces of American automotive history that I had painstakingly restored with my own hands. But when Victoria needed that money for her mom, I didn't think twice. Within a week, I had contacted collectors and dealers. The Mustang alone went for $32,000. The Corvette brought in $28,000. By the end of the month, my garage was empty, except for my daily driver Honda Accord, and Victoria had $80,000 to save her mother's life. She was so grateful, kept telling me how incredible I was, how her mom was going to beat this because of what I sacrificed. She would hug me and say that this proved we were meant for each other forever. I felt good about it, you know? Like this was what marriage was supposed to be about. For 3 months, Victoria has been giving me updates about Everly's treatment. She's responding well to the therapy, having good days and bad days, optimistic about the prognosis. Victoria would come home from visiting her with these detailed stories about how the doctors were amazed at her mother's fighting spirit. She even showed me photos of Everly looking weak but determined in her hospital bed. The thing is, I never went to visit Everly myself. Victoria always had reasons why it wasn't a good time. The treatments made her mom too sick for visitors, or she was sleeping, or the hospital had restricted visiting hours. I trusted my wife completely and figured she knew her mother's needs better than I did. But yesterday afternoon, I got home from work early because I had finished a major project ahead of schedule. Victoria's car was in the driveway, and I could hear her voice coming from upstairs in our bedroom. She was having what sounded like a video call, probably updating someone about her mom's condition. I went to the kitchen to grab a drink and start making dinner as a surprise for her. That's when I heard something that made me stop moving entirely. Victoria was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months. Not the stressed, worried laugh of someone dealing with a family medical crisis. This was pure, happy laughter. I moved closer to the bottom of the stairs, not trying to eavesdrop, but just confused about what could be making her so cheerful when her mother was supposedly fighting for her life. And that's when I heard her say something that changed everything. She was talking about some guy named Patrick, and the tone in her voice when she said his name made my blood run cold. This wasn't how you talk about a coworker or a friend. This was how you talk about someone you're intimate with. I climbed the stairs as quietly as possible, my mind racing through every conversation we'd had over the past 3 months. Every detail about Everly's condition, every dollar of that $80,000, every reason Victoria gave for why I couldn't visit the hospital. As I got closer to our bedroom door, I could hear Victoria's voice more clearly. She was talking about plans, about money, about things that had nothing to do with cancer treatment. My hands were shaking as I positioned myself where I could hear everything without being seen. What I heard in the next 5 minutes is going to haunt me for the rest of my life, and it's also going to be the foundation for the most calculated revenge I've ever planned. Because I've spent the last 24 hours confirming details that Victoria has no idea I know, and I'm about to make her understand exactly what happens when you underestimate someone who trusted you with everything. The woman I married thinks I'm some spineless pushover who will believe anything she tells me. She's about to learn that she made the biggest mistake of her life. Update 1. You guys asked for the details, so here they are. Buckle up because this is going to make you as furious as I am right now. Standing outside our bedroom door, I heard Victoria talking to someone on FaceTime about how this spineless idiot just gave her $80,000 for her mom's treatment, except her mom has been dead for 2 years. She was laughing about how even the neighbors think I'm pathetic, and how she and Patrick are buying a beach house tomorrow. Then she mentioned filing for divorce next week and taking our house because I never checked the prenup she switched. I stood there for maybe 10 more minutes, listening to her plan out how she was going to time everything. She told Patrick that her lawyer confirmed I signed the wrong documents, and that everything we bought during the marriage would go to her. She was particularly excited about getting the house because I had put so much work into renovating it over the past 3 years. The thing that really got me was hearing her talk about how easy I was to manipulate. She said I was the type of guy who would believe anything as long as it involved helping someone. and that she had been testing how far she could push it with me for months before she came up with the cancer story. What she doesn't know is that I've been suspicious of her behavior for longer than she realizes. Not about the cancer specifically, but about her general attitude toward me and our marriage. The way she would dismiss my interests, roll her eyes when I talked about my cars, make comments about how I needed to grow up and stop playing with toys. See, Victoria married me because I had a stable job and was the kind of guy who would provide for her while she figured out what she wanted to do with her life. But over the past year, she started treating me like I was some kind of burden instead of her partner. She would make jokes to her friends about how boring I was right in front of me. She would cancel plans we made together to go out with people I had never met. I started paying attention to her phone habits, her schedule changes, the way she would get dressed up for girls' nights that seemed to happen more and more frequently. I'm not stupid, despite what she apparently thinks. I just wanted to be wrong about what I was seeing. But when she came to me with the cancer story, something felt off about the whole thing. The way she delivered the news was almost like she was performing instead of genuinely upset. The medical details she gave me were vague, and she was way too quick to refuse my offers to come with her to appointments or to talk to the doctors myself. So I did something she would never expect from her spineless husband. I started documenting everything she told me about her mother's condition, every appointment date, every update about the treatment. I also started tracking her actual whereabouts using the location sharing we had set up on our phones for safety reasons. For 3 months, while Victoria thought she was playing me perfectly, I was building a file of every lie she told me. Every day she claimed to be at the hospital, she was actually at Patrick's apartment across town. Every update about her mother's progress was fabricated. Every photo she showed me of Everly in a hospital bed was either old or staged. But here's what Victoria doesn't know yet. Yesterday, after I heard that conversation, I didn't confront her immediately like some emotional idiot. Instead, I spent the entire night making phone calls and sending messages. I reached out to people who could verify certain information for me. I contacted services that could freeze assets. I researched legal options that could protect me and destroy her plans. Because the beautiful thing about Victoria's scheme is that it requires her to maintain several lies simultaneously, and I now have proof that every single one of them is false. The cancer treatment money she supposedly spent? I can trace exactly where it went. The prenup she thinks gives her everything. I have the original documents. The mother who's been dead for 2 years? I have the death certificate. Victoria thinks she's been playing chess while I've been playing checkers. What she doesn't realize is that I've been playing chess for months. And yesterday I finally saw her entire strategy laid out in front of me. This morning she came downstairs acting like the grieving daughter who's been carrying this heavy burden of her mother's illness. She hugged me and thanked me again for being so supportive during this difficult time. She asked if I wanted to go with her to visit her mom today, knowing I would probably say no like I always do. Instead, I told her that I had been thinking about Everly a lot lately and that I really wanted to meet her medical team and understand her treatment better. I said I felt guilty for not being more involved and asked if we could go together this afternoon. The look on Victoria's face was priceless. For just a moment, the mask slipped completely and I could see the panic in her eyes. But she recovered quickly and started making excuses about how today wasn't good because her mom was having a bad reaction to the latest round of chemo. That's when I knew for absolutely certain that everything I suspected was true. And that's also when I started the first phase of making sure Victoria loses everything she thinks she's about to gain. Update 2. Holy shit, you guys. The confrontation happened and it was even worse than I expected. But first, let me tell you what I did before I talk to Victoria because the revenge is already in motion and she has absolutely no idea what's coming. Remember how I mentioned Patrick in the last update? Well, I spent some time figuring out exactly who this guy is and where he works. Turns out Patrick Connolly works in commercial real estate development for the same firm that's been trying to buy out several properties in our neighborhood for the past year, including ours. That's when everything clicked into place. Victoria didn't just randomly decide to scam me out of $80,000. This was targeted. Patrick probably told her about the development plans and how much our house would be worth once the area gets rezoned. She married me 3 years ago, right when I bought this place. And she's been planning this exit strategy ever since the development news broke. But here's what neither of them counted on. I work in municipal planning. I know exactly how these development deals work, and I know who approves the zoning changes. More importantly, I know that Patrick's firm has been using some very questionable tactics to pressure homeowners into selling, and I have documentation of communications that could destroy their entire project. So while Victoria thought she was playing house with me for 3 years, I was actually building a career that gives me access to information that could end Patrick's career permanently. The irony is beautiful. Anyway, Yesterday morning, I woke up and decided it was time to have a real conversation with Victoria about her mother's condition. I made coffee for both of us and sat down at our kitchen table like we do every Saturday morning. I asked her how her mom was doing and if there was anything else the doctors needed from us financially. Victoria went into this whole performance about how grateful Everly was for the treatment money and how she was responding better than expected. She even pulled out her phone to show me a new photo of her mom supposedly taken yesterday. The thing is, I had already reverse searched that image the night before. It was from a medical stock photo website. That's when I put my coffee down and told Victoria I had been thinking about her mother's situation a lot lately, and I wanted to understand something better. I asked her to explain exactly which hospital Everly was being treated at, and what the name of her oncologist was. The way Victoria's face changed was incredible. She started stumbling over details that she had been delivering smoothly for months. She couldn't remember the doctor's name she had mentioned before. She mixed up which floor of the hospital her mom was supposedly on. She kept looking at her phone like she was trying to find information to reference. So, I told her I had decided to visit Everly myself that afternoon, and I had already taken time off work to drive to the hospital. I said I felt terrible for not being more involved in her care, and that I wanted to meet the medical team personally, to thank them for everything they were doing. Victoria immediately started trying to talk me out of it. She said her mom was having a particularly bad day and wasn't up for visitors. When I said that was fine, I would just talk to the nurses and doctors. She said the whole wing was closed for cleaning. When I suggested we could go tomorrow instead, she said her mom was being transferred to a different facility. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed Victoria the death certificate for Everly Morrison, dated November 15th, 2022. 2 years and 4 months ago. The silence in our kitchen was deafening. Victoria stared at the document on my phone screen, and I watched her realize that her entire elaborate scheme had just collapsed. She didn't try to deny it or make excuses. She just sat there looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I told her that I knew about Patrick, about the beach house, about the development deal, and about her plans to divorce me and take our house. I explained that I had been tracking her location for months and that I knew she had never been to any hospital. I showed her screenshots of every lie she had told me about her mother's treatment progress. That's when Victoria finally started talking, and what she said revealed exactly why she had targeted me in the first place. She told me that Patrick had been feeding her information about which properties in our neighborhood were going to be most valuable after the rezoning. She said they had been planning this for over a year, waiting for the right opportunity to maximize how much money they could extract from the situation. She explained that the cancer story was Patrick's idea, because it would make me emotional enough to liquidate assets quickly without asking too many questions. She said they had researched my personality type and determined that I was the kind of person who would sacrifice my own interests to help someone I cared about. But here's the part that really got me furious. Victoria told me that she had never actually loved me or wanted to build a life with me. She said I was always supposed to be temporary, just a stepping stone to help her get established financially until she could be with someone who actually shared her ambitions and lifestyle goals. She said Patrick understood her in ways that I never could because he was sophisticated and worldly, while I was just some small-town guy who collected old cars and thought that counted as having interests. She told me that she had been embarrassed to introduce me to her friends because I didn't fit the image she wanted to project. The conversation went on for almost 2 hours, with Victoria trying to justify everything she had done and explain why I should just accept the situation and move on with my life. She actually suggested that I should be grateful for the experience because it taught me valuable lessons about relationships and trust. That's when I told Victoria about the phone calls I had made the night before. I explained that Patrick's firm was about to lose the development contract because I had provided evidence of their unethical practices to the zoning commission. I told her that Patrick's apartment was actually a company rental that he was about to lose access to when his employment ended. I also mentioned that I had contacted our bank and placed fraud alerts on all accounts associated with the $80,000 she had stolen. Every transaction she had made with that money was now flagged for investigation. But the best part was when I told Victoria about the original prenup documents that I had kept copies of, and how her switched version was never properly notarized or witnessed according to state requirements. Victoria started crying and asking me how I could be so cruel to someone who had been dealing with family medical issues. She tried to convince me that she had only lied because she was scared and confused, and that she really did love me despite everything she had just admitted. That's when I told her that I was done with the conversation and that she needed to pack her things and find somewhere else to stay while we figured out the legal aspects of ending our marriage. Final update. You guys wanted to know how this ended, and let me tell you, it was even more satisfying than I hoped. The meltdown was spectacular, and it's still ongoing 3 days later. After our confrontation on Saturday, Victoria spent the weekend alternating between trying to convince me that we could work through this and threatening to take everything in the divorce. She kept insisting that I was overreacting to what she called a misunderstanding about her mother's condition. She actually tried to tell me that Everly had died after she got the money from me. So technically, she hadn't lied about needing the treatment funds. The mental gymnastics were incredible. She sat in our living room for hours explaining how I had misunderstood her intentions and how she had been planning to tell me the truth once her mother's estate was settled. She said Patrick was just a friend who had been helping her navigate the legal complexities of dealing with her mother's death while managing medical expenses. When I pointed out that her mother had been dead for over 2 years, she claimed that Patrick had been helping her process grief-related depression that required expensive therapy. Victoria spent Sunday morning making phone calls to people I couldn't identify, speaking in hushed tones and getting increasingly agitated with each conversation. She kept looking at me like she was trying to figure out exactly how much I knew and what I was planning to do with the information. At one point, she asked me directly if I had contacted anyone about our situation, and when I didn't answer, she started demanding to know who I had been talking to and what I had told them. But the real fireworks started Monday morning when Victoria tried to transfer money for the beach house down payment. She called me from the bank screaming about how all the accounts were frozen and how she couldn't access any of the funds. She demanded that I fix it immediately because she had commitments to fulfill and people who were expecting payments from her. I calmly explained to Victoria that when you commit fraud by falsely representing the purpose of financial transactions, banks tend to freeze assets while they investigate. I told her that every transfer she had made with the $80,000 was now being reviewed by their fraud prevention team, and she would need to provide documentation proving that the money was used for legitimate medical expenses. Of course, she couldn't provide that documentation because there were no medical expenses. Every single transaction she had made was for personal purchases, deposits into Patrick's accounts, payments toward the beach house they thought they were buying together, and what appeared to be expensive dinners and shopping trips. The bank representative apparently told her that the pattern of spending looked nothing like medical-related expenses. The conversation got really heated when Victoria started blaming me for sabotaging her future and ruining her relationship with Patrick. She said I was being vindictive and petty, and that I should just accept that our marriage was over and let her move on with her life. She actually told me that I should be grateful she was being honest with me now instead of continuing to pretend that she loved me when she clearly never had. That's when I reminded Victoria that she had spent 3 months lying to me about her dead mother while stealing my life savings, and that honesty wasn't exactly her strong suit. I also mentioned that Patrick probably wasn't going to be in any position to buy beach houses for the foreseeable future, which made her demand to know what I meant by that. See, while Victoria was having her meltdown at the bank, Patrick was getting terminated from his job. The evidence I provided to the Zoning Commission about his firm's unethical practices didn't just kill their development project. It triggered an internal investigation that uncovered a whole pattern of misconduct involving falsified property assessments, kickback schemes with local contractors, and what appeared to be a systematic effort to defraud homeowners in targeted neighborhoods. Patrick had been using his position to identify homeowners who could be manipulated into selling their properties below market value. He would research their financial situations, family circumstances, and personal vulnerabilities, then approach them with offers designed to create artificial urgency. He would then arrange for the properties to be purchased through shell companies connected to his firm, artificially inflating the values for development purposes. Victoria and I were just one target in a much larger scheme that had been operating for over 2 years. When Patrick got fired Monday morning, he also lost access to the company apartment he had been living in. The place Victoria thought was his personal residence was actually corporate housing that came with his job. He had until the end of the week to pack his belongings and find somewhere else to live, and his former employer was demanding immediate return of all company property, including the furniture and electronics he had been using. But here's the beautiful part. Patrick had been spending money like he was about to close on a major development deal. He had made commitments based on commissions he expected to receive from the project that just got canceled. He had signed contracts for expensive renovations to the beach house, put deposits down on luxury items, and even leased a new car based on his projected income. Without his job or the apartment, he had no way to meet his financial obligations. Victoria found out about Patrick's situation when she went to his place Monday evening to figure out their next move. She discovered him packing boxes and trying to cancel contracts for things they had already committed to purchasing. That's when he told her that not only was the beach house deal dead, but he was probably going to have to declare bankruptcy to deal with his debts. He also mentioned that his termination might trigger criminal charges if the investigation uncovered evidence of deliberate fraud. The conversation between Victoria and Patrick apparently got very ugly very quickly. She blamed him for getting her involved in a scheme that was obviously going to fail, and for not warning her that targeting me specifically could backfire so dramatically. He blamed her for not being smart enough to realize that I might actually investigate her story about her mother, and for underestimating my ability to cause problems for both of them. They spent hours arguing about whose fault it was that their plan had collapsed, with Victoria apparently screaming at Patrick that he had promised her this would be easy money and a guaranteed way to get out of her marriage with a substantial financial cushion. Patrick reportedly told her that she was the one who had insisted on taking such a large amount up front, instead of spacing out the theft over a longer period to avoid detection. But the absolute best part came Tuesday morning when Victoria showed up at my office demanding that I fix the bank situation so she could access the money she needed to survive. She was crying and saying that she couldn't afford to pay for basic expenses like food and gas because all of her access to funds had been cut off. She claimed that I was forcing her into homelessness and poverty out of spite. I explained to Victoria that the money she had been spending wasn't actually hers, and that she would need to return every penny she had taken before the fraud investigation would be resolved. I told her that since she couldn't provide receipts for legitimate medical expenses, she would probably be facing criminal charges unless she could make full restitution within a specific time frame that the bank would determine. Victoria started begging me to help her because she said she had nowhere to go and no way to support herself. She promised that she would pay back every cent if I would just unfreeze the accounts and let her access enough money to get an apartment somewhere. She said she understood now that what she had done was wrong, and that she wanted to make things right between us and start over with complete honesty. When I asked her how exactly she planned to pay back $80,000 without a job or any legitimate source of income, she suggested that I could loan her money to get back on her feet, and then she would pay me back once she found work. The audacity was absolutely incredible. She wanted me to loan her money to pay me back for money she had already stolen from me. That's when I told Victoria that she had 48 hours to remove her belongings from our house because I was changing the locks and filing for divorce. I explained that the prenup she had tried to switch was invalid because it hadn't been properly witnessed or notarized according to state requirements, which meant she had no claim to any of the property we had acquired during our marriage. I also mentioned that I would be pursuing full restitution for the money she had stolen, plus damages for the cars I had been forced to sell, plus interest and legal fees. The look on Victoria's face when she realized that she was about to lose everything was exactly what I had been waiting for since I heard that conversation about her spineless husband. She went from confident manipulator to desperate victim in the span of one conversation, and it was absolutely perfect. She started crying and asking how I could be so cruel to someone who had made a mistake and was trying to fix it. But I wasn't done yet. I also told Victoria that I had been in contact with the district attorney's office about the fraud charges, and that they were very interested in her case because it fit a pattern they had been tracking related to fake medical emergencies. I mentioned that they were particularly interested in cases where stolen money was used to purchase luxury items and real estate because it suggested premeditation and sophisticated planning rather than desperate circumstances. Wednesday morning brought even more consequences when Victoria discovered that Patrick had emptied their joint account at the bank where they had been pooling money for the beach house purchase. He had withdrawn everything during his lunch break on Tuesday and disappeared without telling her where he was going. She tried calling him dozens of times, but he had apparently changed his phone number or blocked her completely. It turns out that Patrick had decided to cut his losses and try to salvage whatever he could from the situation. He took the money they had saved together and used it to hire a lawyer who specializes in real estate fraud cases. He was apparently planning to cooperate fully with the investigation into his former employer in exchange for reduced charges against him personally. Victoria showed up at my house Wednesday evening, demanding that I help her track down Patrick because she needed her share of the money he had taken. She said it wasn't fair that he got to keep everything when the original plan had been her idea, and she was the one taking the biggest risk by lying to me for months. She actually asked me to call the police and report Patrick for theft, apparently not understanding the irony of asking me to help her recover money that had been stolen from me in the first place. That's when I explained to Victoria that Patrick was probably making the smartest decision he could make under the circumstances. I told her that anyone with half a brain would realize that she was going to be the primary target of any criminal prosecution because the money had come from her husband and she had been the one maintaining the elaborate deception about her mother's condition. I also mentioned that Patrick probably understood that staying connected to her was going to make his own legal situation worse, because prosecutors would be more likely to see him as part of an ongoing conspiracy rather than someone who had been manipulated by a desperate spouse. By cutting ties with her completely, he was positioning himself as a witness rather than a co-conspirator. As of today, Victoria is staying in a motel room that she's paying for with a credit card that's probably going to be maxed out within a week. Patrick has completely disappeared from her life, and she has no way to contact him or access any of the resources they had been sharing. She's facing financial ruin, legal troubles, and the complete destruction of the future she thought she was building for herself. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in the house that she thought she was going to take from me, planning how I'm going to spend the restitution money when the legal process is finished. I'm thinking about maybe starting a new car collection since I'll be getting back significantly more than the $80,000 I originally lost. The interest and penalties alone are going to be substantial. The woman who called me a spineless idiot is about to find out what happens when you underestimate someone who's smarter than you think and has access to information systems that can destroy your life. Her mother would be disgusted indeed if she were alive to see what her daughter had become. Victoria texted me this morning asking if we could meet to discuss a payment plan for returning the money. I replied with the address of the pawn shop where she can check for her jewelry that I sold to cover my legal expenses. I also sent her the contact information for a bankruptcy attorney because she's going to need one. Some people never learn that actions have consequences. Victoria is about to get a very expensive education in that particular life lesson, and I'm going to enjoy watching every minute of it unfold.